So we wanted to play that song because as we conclude our series, Modern Family, we've talked about all kinds of issues when it relates to relationships and marriage. And as that song was being played, I was sitting in the back and I was listening. And I thought to myself, we often don't realize what God has blessed us with in our lives until sometimes it is gone. And my hope is that if you're married or in a relationship right now, that through this series you have actually taken time to look at your spouse or the significant other, and really began to say, how can I help and encourage our relationship? How can I look at the things that we've talked about over these last 4 weeks? It'll be week 5. When it comes to expectations, when it comes to foxes, we talked about things that interfere in those relationships, the differences between men and women, issues related to sex that we talked about just a couple weeks ago. And then today we'll talk about parenting. My hope is that we, through this series, it's easy to listen to some of those things and think to ourselves, wow, are you listening? And I think that I hope through this series that we have taken and stopped and said, what is it that God is challenging me with? And some of you that aren't even in a relationship right now, I know that this series, I'm hoping, has been powerful for you as well. Because there's certain dynamics that I think that you can get a head start with and be prepared for. So right now I want to ask those that are on the panel to come up here, and I want to explain to you why I've asked some of these guys up here. I'm being positioned over here. I've asked each of these people to bring a different perspective, and I'll wait for them to get situated. So I asked Mike here to be up here because Mike is in the early stages of parenting. So he's got. Why don't you share real quick your family, what you're looking at here?
At home right now, Ezra is still sleeping. He's 2.
Mm-hmm.
He was up for 6 hours last night. And Eleanor is napping with my wife, who has a migraine.
Yeah.
And she is 6 months old.
So you've got a great perspective this morning.
Wonderful.
Yes. Connie, my wife, would you share kind of our situation?
We have 4. We have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old. He's 16 months now.
So we're done. We started actually figuring out where that all came from. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I asked Jeff to be up here. Let me get my stuff out of your way. That's yours. I asked Jeff to be up here, and when I asked him, he was like, "What do you want me up there for? I don't have any kids. Are we having problems?" Thank you. I asked Jeff to be up here because, and when I did, he said, "What do you want me up there for? I don't have any kids." And I said, "Well, I'm hoping that he can maybe bridge a gap." And sometimes I think we forget as parents what it was like to be a kid. Now, I'm not saying Jeff is a kid, but what I am saying is he's kind of, he's coming out of that period in his life in his 20s, and he's looking down the barrel at a family and kids, and so I'm hoping that he can maybe add a unique perspective. And one thing I've always appreciated about Jeff is I think he's a man with wisdom, and so I know that he'll be able to add to this conversation. And then I asked Lisa to be a part of this because she is looking on the other side of parenting as all her kids are gone now, and I'm hoping that we can get some juicy stories from Lisa, being that Jeff is her son. So I trust we'll get a unique perspective here. With that, we'll go ahead and just jump right in. Can we have the first question? How do I keep everyone in my house on time for baths, TV, etc.?
When you figure it out, let me know.
What do you guys think? How do we keep... I'll go ahead and sit down here. How do we keep things on time when you're dealing with multiple kids?
It really would be great if Bethany were feeling well and here this morning, because
Yeah.
she would have a completely different answer than I am going to offer. And my answer is, don't worry about it. Why stress out about something that is never going to work out, and you get focusing on the wrong stuff? And so at our household, my kid who was up 6 hours, maybe I shouldn't be up here. What is happening? We just have figured out that we need a policy of grace for ourselves, because stuff doesn't go as you plan. You can't control kids' sleep habit, no matter how many books you read about how you can do that. So keeping people on time and out the door, we learn to be gracious, and we ask our friends to be gracious. We might be 15 minutes late. It's fine.
Good. So there's a part of that where you learn to expect there to be
Chill out.
delays. Yeah. Okay. What else?
For me, I'm not a detailed person, and I don't plan anything. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of person, so I had to learn to plan some things and learn to schedule certain things, like, hey, it's been 3 days, maybe we should take a bath, like that kind of thing. I do the fingernail check. Does anybody do that, where they pull their hands up? Oh, they're all black, so maybe we need a bath? Yeah. That's horrible, I know. But I'm just not, I don't plan, so I had to train myself to plan things out and say, okay, every other night, bath night, unless they were out in the mud, then obviously they need another one, and that kind of thing. Like, I just go in and turn off the TV and say, hey, you've been here long enough. I don't keep like a timer or anything, but I guess you could make a schedule if you're that kind of person, but I'm not. And I've learned that I tried to do that in the beginning, be that person, and it drove me crazy because I'm not that person. So going along with what Mike said, I had to give myself grace and say, hey, I'm never going to be that person, but there's little things that I can do that make it easier in the end.
Yeah, I hesitate to say that anything my parents did worked, because anyone who works with me knows my punctuality habits.
I was going to say, should you really be sharing?
I was going to recuse myself entirely, but then I remembered something that might be worth sharing. Don't be afraid to use some tough love as well. When I was in middle school, I had just a heck of a time getting to the bus stop in time. And so my dad was constantly having to drive me to school when I was staying at his house. And he told me one day, he said, if you miss the bus, I'm not driving you to school today. And I was like, that sounds great. And so I missed the bus that day, and I was like, all right. So I started to get back in the house. He said, no, you're still going to school. He said, I'm not driving you to school. And I had to walk. I don't know, for those of you who are familiar with the area, I had to walk from Windsor Woods area over by South Plaza Trail, and I had to walk all the way to Plaza Middle School in Lynn Haven. So I got there a couple hours late, but I didn't miss the bus anymore for at least a while after that. So sometimes you just got to show some tough love. And like I said, you could see how long it lasted, but it did work at the time. So don't be afraid to be hard on your kids as well.
I was going to say, if you have a set time that you think you're going to start earlier than that, because something's always going to happen, something unplanned, and just start maybe a half hour earlier than you plan to. So
It has amazed me. With each added kid, it like multiplies how long it takes to get out of the house. So I'm looking forward to the day where there's no longer that needed buffer. But I think you're right. You need to create space. So good. What about the next question?
That's it.
How do I balance praise and rewards so my don't expect this? So my kids don't expect this. How do we balance praise and rewards so that our kids don't always expect?
First off, don't diss your kids. That would be the first thing. It's terrible. It's a terrible idea.
How do we balance that, guys? How do you guys balance that in parenting so that our kids aren't always expecting, if they do something positive, they always receive a reward?
That was really mean. For those who didn't hear that, apparently I didn't merit any praise or reward when I was a kid.
That's a parenting tactic.
Just withhold everything. No.
Well, I think it depends on the kid too. Like I have one, maybe two, we're getting there, that require a lot of praise and a lot of reward, and they don't necessarily ask for it. They just or expect it, but it does them good if I praise them. But I have one that's the only reason why she does things. So, oops, I shouldn't have said she. That's the only reason why she does things is to get the reward. So we've had to go back sometimes, and she'll watch me give a praise or a reward to one of the other ones, and she'll be like, "Why didn't I?" And it's like, because you didn't have the right attitude. So it goes along with a tough love, and I hate that. Ask Mike. I absolutely hate that. I want to give second, third, fourth chances. I just don't like not giving equal reward, equal praise. But sometimes, especially for her, I just have to not at that time, because she needs to learn to do things with a good attitude and a grateful heart.
I feel like I'm on this panel so that I can provide the perspective of how to fail on the fly. So yesterday...
How'd you know that, man?
Yeah, this is like, here's how not to do it. This is a parenting panel, so I can talk about like bathroom stuff, right?
You can talk about what?
Ezra's been potty training or whatever, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so it's not about me. We'll get to that.
We'll deal with that later, Mike.
We've been trying to. He's been backed up. We'll just put it that way. Yeah. And so I had trying to force this kid to drink prune juice all day yesterday, and we had the reward hanging out there that if you finish this can of prune juice, you get a cookie. And I stubbornly held to that he had to drink every last drop of it, and he got to the end and just couldn't stomach anymore, and I became that dad who just no cookie. And Bethany probably disagreed with that, and that's probably why he stayed up for 6 hours last night, because I failed again as a father. But what I'm learning is that you have to be consistent. And so the reason I didn't give him the cookie is because several times before that he's gotten whatever a cookie or whatever the reward is for doing good, even though he didn't quite meet my expectation. And he's figured that out. He's so smart, and I didn't realize that the manipulation begins so early. So that was a lesson learned. You have to be consistent.
I think you hit on something, Mike. So often we have to make decisions on the fly as parents, right? And I think as we make those decisions, I think we have to allow ourselves some grace too. There are decisions that I've made as a parent that I look back on and say, I might do that a little bit differently. And I'm not saying I would change what you did, because you're making decisions on the fly. Most of the time, it's the first time you've had to face a particular thing. And I think we need to pray through those decisions, ask God for wisdom, and then allow ourselves some room for God to work even amidst our failures at times.
And you're allowed one redo, as I understand it, in the parenting thing. So, Ezra, our first son, we call him the first pancake. You know how you inevitably screw up the first pancake? And so, we're making all these mistakes on the first pancake. So the next time, though, Eleanor's going to be ready.
She'll be the perfect
Then
child.
she proves to have a totally different personality,
Exactly,
and it all
that's what I was
backfires.
gonna
We
say.
can't wreck
Yeah.
all the pancakes.
Yeah, all three of my kids completely different personalities, completely. And so you can't do the same for one that you can for the other, because they respond differently. So you just have to learn how your kids respond and what they respond to, and go with that. You learn the second time that if this reward doesn't work for this one, then okay, well then you try something else for that one. But it could work for this one, and something else totally will work for the other one. So you just got to try to kind of figure that out. And once you do, then you just got to stick with that.
Good. I like that perspective, because, well, if there's anything I've learned with 4 kids is that each one is very different. That's what changes a lot of what I do. Yeah, good. Next question. Due to finances, I am living with my mother. How do I get my boys to treat her with respect? She treats them bad and shows my daughter favoritism. What would you guys say to that? That's Connie and I have been in situations where we have lived with parents in between ministries and in between places for a period of months. And it is hard to raise a child underneath the roof of a parent. So what would you guys say to that?
I'm not qualified to answer this one, so.
Connie, what would you say to that? Because we have had to face that.
Yeah, and with it came up some tough conversations between parents and us regarding our kids and what we expect of them and how they're to be punished, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, what they're allowed to watch. There was a lot of conversations like that. And sometimes you just have to do that. You just have to sit down with the parent and say, look, this is the way we're choosing to raise our children, and we need you to follow suit. And wow, this is a tough question.
Well,
I think sometimes I don't know how old the girl is, but sometimes we have to be straightforward with our kids and say, look, this is what is going on and this is why it's not right. The Bible teaches that this is the way we are to treat each other. This is the way we are to respect authority. And even though grandma is not doing what we have taught you, you need to still do that, and you need to show grandma how to follow Christ. We've had those conversations because, especially when we lived with Mike's parents, his mom is not a believer, so it's a very different. It's very different when you're raising your child to follow Christ. So, just having those conversations, and in some ways, I guess it makes them have to grow up a little bit, but in other ways, it teaches them a lot. They're learning that people look at them too for how they live their life, and that they can reflect Christ even at a young age. So, teaching her to respect her brothers even when grandma isn't shows grandma a lesson too, that these are my brothers and they deserve respect and they deserve your respect.
You want to be careful not to pit kids against
No.
grandparents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm trying to
I
say.
know.
But yeah, it's a tough situation. I don't know how I really don't know how you get through that easily.
Well, I like what you said, that a conversation has to happen.
Right.
And I would say this to the gentlemen in the room. Sometimes we have a tendency, guys, to kind of say, hey, you can go ahead and have that conversation. That is a conversation I think that as a man you're responsible for. As a father and as a husband, I think that you talk with your wife together about it, but then I think the man is responsible to lead his household, and therefore has to be the one to enter in that conversation with love and grace. But I've seen where a lot of men will be absent during conflict like that, and I don't think that that's really leading our families biblically. So, yeah.
This is a really this is a really great question, and I think it brings up, it's more than, it applies to such a broader so many broader ideas than just this one specific instance that's brought up. I think that any time that you inject something new into that family relationship, something, I hesitate to use the term outside because obviously grandparents, we don't think of them as outsiders, but anytime that there's something more than just what's going on in the family that has an influence, you have to treat it very, very delicately. And there's some sensitive subjects that I'm trying to speak very carefully, but it could be something as a divorce and a remarriage, as a new parent being put into that situation. You're going to run into a lot of these same things, and it could be again, it could be a living situation where maybe that family that existed in one paradigm is now under somebody else's roof, and so things change drastically. And one of the things that I would caution is that, like Mike said, you're making a lot of decisions on the fly. You can't make all of them right. You're not going to get everything 100%, and so it's a given that you're going to mess up some of those, and you can work towards, to doing the most right, but there's going to be some problems. And so I think that's where what we've already talked about a few times is where that grace is really going to come in. Looking back through my life personally, there have been situations similar to this with me and my sisters that caused problems, but because there was a grace, that those relationships were afterwards restored. And so even if things get bad, it's important not to let that be the end of the story. Because no matter how bad things get, part of the gospel of Christ is that not only that he works in our lives, but that he can restore those relationships that we have with other people and make them new the same way that he has made us new. And I've seen that, again, not this situation specifically, but kind of the same type of situation where things have gotten bad and then those relationships have been restored to where people have no idea coming in on the other side that there was ever a problem. And so always have patience and always have grace and be ready to forgive. Even if you have to be the bigger person and the first one to do it, be ready to do that because you'll be surprised what you can go through and still come out all right on the other side. So.
Can I add one more thing?
Oh, yeah, of
I think
course.
it's a good time to teach life lessons too, like teaching our kids that in the world, hurting people do hurt people. That's when you're hurting, your natural response is to hurt people. So going back to what you were saying, I wasn't trying to say disrespect
I know you weren't,
grandma.
yeah.
I'm saying that the way that we help grandma along is, or the situation that you're in is loving them and teaching our kids to love them no matter what and respect them no matter what, but knowing that sometimes the reason people respond the way they do is because they're hurting inside, and that's how we need to help them through it by loving them and respecting them. I mean, it goes even, I mean, my daughter's having a situation at school where some kids are being mean to her, but teaching her about why, maybe the reasons why this situation is happening, why kids are being mean, because of the background that they come from, that hurt inside of them, they don't know what to do with it. So trying to teach them life lessons, because as they grow up, they're going to be surrounded by people that are hurting and that are going to lash out when they're upset.
Yeah, good.
Real quick, when you, yes, I do agree that you need to speak to the parent, but you need to do it when the kids aren't there, and you need to do it when you're not angry. Think about what you want to say, and even, because a lot of times things will even escalate as you're trying to speak, but try really, really hard not to get into the anger. Just even if you have to back away for a few minutes and start over again, just try to keep it low key so that it's not the anger that's speaking, it's the situation.
And I think with that, you want the grandparent to speak into the child's life. Right. And so you don't want to crush that. And so I think there is I think you hit on it, Lisa, there's a conversation that has to develop. Not just here's a list of guidelines and rules that we follow in my house, because really you're not in your house. So there is a conversation. Yeah, Jeff, you're...
Oh, are we
Yeah, go ahead.
for whoever submitted that question, I feel like we just really villainized Grandma up here, and that was not our intention. Grandma is probably lovely. We were just speaking to the themes in general. You may be like, my grandma's not that bad. I don't know what. So we weren't villainizing Grandma. That's just speaking in generalities.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, man. Yeah, because Grandma has a lot of good things to add. And that's what I mean. There's a conversation that has to develop. Good, next question. My kids are always fighting. You guys don't have that problem, do you? How do I deal with sibling rivalry? So is Ezra punching Emma? Yeah?
Emma.
Eleanor, I'm sorry. Yeah. Eleanor, yes.
He's not punching anybody else's kids.
He's not, okay.
But
okay.
Actually, Eleanor busted Ezra's lip last week. Eleanor's 6 months old, took a toy to Ezra's face because he was up in her face, and she jacked him, and his lip was bleeding, and he was on the floor crying. So,
wow. You sound proud.
Yeah, I was just amazed.
What are you feeding, Eleanor?
So the parenting philosophy in our house is they will settle it themselves. So, listen, I'm not there yet. I think that when that time comes, how do you? I think it's a sit-down, thoughtful conversation about love and forgiveness, and all of this starts with modeling it in your marriage. I think so. If I'm always fighting with Bethany, and I think Ezra and Eleanor will probably model that relationship. But if we're kind and forgiving and sharing of our toys, maybe they'll do the same thing. Hopefully.
That's great insight, man. Absolutely. I think that's huge.
I feel like we could go on really long here, so I'm going to try not to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to watch
From some of my story personally, and I know there's very few people in here that have heard it. Some of you guys who are involved in Next Gen on the weekends know it, a little bit of it. But me and my sisters, I love both of them dearly, and you guys see them here on Sunday mornings, and we have a really good relationship. But that was not always the case. Again, my parents separated when we were younger, and that caused a lot of trouble for me and my sisters. And my mom could probably speak to this about how she dealt with it. But I was physically violent to my sisters on a regular basis, and really caused a lot of damage to those relationships. And that's why I can speak from experience when I talk about how having grace and allowing God to work in those relationships can restore them. So, because that's, again, the relationships I have with both my sisters are amazing today, and I'm so blessed by them and so thankful to have them. But that was really a God thing, because left to the world's devices, everything I did should have severed those bonds entirely, and they didn't. So. This may be talking about, I mean, again, these are such broad questions. They may be specific situations, but they cover such broad topics. And it could be something as kids just arguing with one another, or like I said, there's always a worse level it can go to. And so I think I'm actually going to hand, I don't know if you want to talk or not, but I'm going to hand you the mic anyways, because my mom endured that relationship and did so in a way, again, where not only was she supportive of my sisters, who were the ones who were the victims of that, but she also did it in such a way that was supporting me as well, and allowed those relationships to be restored. So do you want to talk, or can you talk? We'll talk later. So yeah, I think Mike hit on something really insightful, that if your kids are constantly having that problem, take a look at what you're modeling for them. And even if you and your spouse, maybe it's just joking around, maybe you guys fighting is your love language. If you're Dave Hensley and confrontation is your love language, the people Dave picks on the most are the ones that he loves, and he doesn't mean anything by it. And if you know him, you realize that. But from a kid who's just looking from the outside and say, well, Dad's always picking on Mom, even if it's from a loving place, they may not be able to navigate all the complexities of your relationship. So they may just say, okay, well, picking, antagonizing, and nagging is how we show affection. So be careful of what you're modeling. But again, in my situation specifically, again, that grace and that patience is super important, that they realize even when, if there may be problems, that they can turn around and come back from those, that there's grace there for them.
That's good. That's good. Anything else? Move on. All right, next question. My children are busy, and so am I. How can I find time to stay involved in their lives? Let me say this before we answer the question. I'm glad we're asking that question. As my kids get older, my oldest is 8. I think about that a lot. The job that I do here takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of it is unscheduled time. And so I am constantly battling this question myself. I don't want to be the dad that wasn't there. I want to be the dad that my son remembers playing ball with. I want to be the dad that my daughters remember me taking them out for ice cream or lunch or dinner. So, yeah, this is a great question. What would you guys say to that?
This is something that we're aspiring to. Is in our culture, it seems like the more things you get your kids signed up for, the more points you get as a parent. And it creates this busyness that is, I've only observed this, I haven't done it yet, that just makes life difficult. So that your kid doesn't have to be in a sport every season for them to have an enriched full life. I don't think. This is my perspective. You do is, take it with a grain of salt. But it seems like when I read through Scripture, I see times of rest. I see, a call to invest in the things that are most important. And so you can enrich your child's life without being busy. And that means that you don't necessarily have to sign them up for every time they come home with a new request. It doesn't mean they can't do anything, but just I want our kids to have those opportunities to pursue their passions, whether it's sports or dance or art. But if that's at a sacrifice for their home life and our time with family, then it's not worth it. So
I think that's very wise, because you do want your kids to pursue things they're passionate about, but you don't want to sacrifice that home life at the same time. I think a lot of families can easily make that mistake. Yeah.
We had that issue where we were constantly going, and the kids are doing this and that, and and a lot of the stuff, and I'm not bashing the church, but a lot of it was church. We had meetings, the kids were involved in this, and they had this, and they had this, and we were never together because I was on this committee or I was doing this and they were doing that. And it finally got to the point where I had to say, no, we can't do everything, and you can't do everything. You have to learn to say no. And it doesn't mean you're selfish. It doesn't mean that you don't love people or love God. Or that you're not serving Him, but you do need to pick out what your priorities are and find out what they are. And your kids can't do everything, just like Mike said. They have to be, especially when I was fairly lucky because they all were in chorus, so that was my geeky kids. So I mean, they were together. They weren't all sports and this was doing this sport and that was doing this sport. Well, they all like the same thing, I guess that was.
It's tough when your kids are as talented as yours.
Oh, I know. Well, they were all in the same. They were interested in the same thing, so that made it a little easier. But it was just. I'm sorry. Take it away.
I was cool in high school, guys. That's what.
Yes, he was. He was very cool.
What happened?
They all were. But you just have to you have to set your priorities, and you have to learn to say no. And I can't just real quick to go back to the other question. It was with a lot of prayer that we made it through that, because I was praying all the time and just trying not to. I was realizing the situation that they were in, and not taking things personally. And when people were lashing out or things were happening, you have to separate and then talk to each one individually, and but just remember what they're going through and try to empathize. Yeah, that's right. Just a lot of prayer.
On that subject, can I just interject that your prayers were answered? Because when Jeff shared that story with me, I was like, what? Because the Riggs siblings are like a TV show. Like, it's not real life, how close they are. And the fact that that's the backstory was shocking to me. And it's just a real praise to God that you saw him through that.
Well, God saw them. I gave them over to Him years ago. I realized that I could not do it by myself, and there was I was worrying about them, and there was this one day I just sat down and I was like, I know that you gave them to me temporarily. I know. Is there a return policy? No. But I just said, God, they're yours. I can't be there all the time. I can't. It's not that I don't worry about them, but I can't sit there and worry all the time. But they were in God's hands, and they still are.
And that speaks to perspective, I think. A lot of times when you're in a really tough situation, even if it's like a situation that lasts years, it's easy to be like, why is life so hard? Why are my kids so unbearable? Like, why are they so out of control? And there's proof that God can take you from that, even if it's over a course of several years, that this is not forever. And that
This
if
too
you-
shall pass.
Yes, exactly. So and you can apply that to a smaller situation when your kid's having a tantrum at the store. Like, stay calm. This is just another afternoon at Walmart. There will be another in the future. But relax and don't lose it because your kids are watching you all the time. But the bad times will be temporary.
I love the story here, and one day I would love for them to share that story more in depth, because there is a lot of redemption that took place there. I think it's incredible, and I'm sure I don't even know the full extent of it. For the sake of time, I know there was one question, and Mike kind of alluded to it, on discipline. I got to see some of the questions ahead of time. Do we have the one on, is this it? Yeah. Let's do this real quick. I think this will be important for a church with a lot of young kids. How should I discipline my child? How often, when, and where? What would you guys say to that?
You have to be consistent, and you have to follow through with what you say. You can't say, oh, if you do this, and kids take things literally. You can't say, if you don't come over here, I'm going to pull your head off, because it's just, that's not going to happen. You have to set things. I mean, I didn't say that. I did not, because they obviously have their heads. But I mean, you have to be realistic, and you have to say things that they understand. And but you do. If you say, if this, then this, you have to follow through with it, because otherwise, they never will. And you have to start when they're young. It's very difficult to bring them back when they're older. But it's just, you need discipline. Kids need boundaries. They want them. They want to know. This is just my personal opinion, but I think that it shows more love when you're disciplining them, and you have boundaries for them, and they realize they know what their expectations are. And then it's harder to keep doing that than to just, oh, whatever, you just do whatever, or okay, you can just go whatever. And I've seen so many times where when they were younger, the parents just let their kids do whatever they wanted, and I was always the one, no, you can't do that. You can't watch that movie. I mean, I wasn't, you can only watch G movies, but it was, I really don't want you to do that. Or, and now, not all of them, but there are several of them, their kids are having trouble with their kids. Some of them are in jail. I mean, it's just, you have to stick with them, and you have to be firm, and you have to follow through with what you say.
When it comes to being consistent, I will tell you that is the hardest thing for me. That is so hard. And then you throw a Caden in the mix, and it's nearly impossible. I'm serious. There's nights when I just look at Mike, and I was like, I have no idea what to do, because she's the kid who just doesn't care. I'm of the mind that my kids don't all get disciplined the same way. Some things work better for others. Like Malachi, I just have to say his name, and he's in tears, and he's done. That's all I have to do is say Malachi, and he is bawling, and that's it. Caden, on the other hand, I could spank her butt 20 times in a row, and she would not care. So obviously I don't use that very much, because I don't want to be like beating her constantly. So timeout works occasionally for her, but she's just the kid that does not care. So I've been trying to give myself grace in that, I guess, and going about it differently with her. Like, I try to speak to her more into situations, like showing her, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Is this what you want to happen? If you do this, if we say this, this is what they're going to think, or this is what is going to happen. Like, if you say mean things, it's going to make your brother cry. She does that a lot. She's really good.
Yeah.
But
if we were to treat Malachi
the
same as Caden, it would crush Malachi's spirit.
Right. Yeah, he's very tender-hearted.
And then it moves on from a place of discipline. Then I think you could enter the realm of abuse if you're crushing a kid's spirit.
Right, yeah.
We are very much of the mindset that if a child needs a spanking, we'll spank them. I think Scripture alludes to that at times. But at the same time, after that's done, I will take one of our kids, whoever that was, and I'll give them a hug, and I'll reinforce with them, okay, why did that happen? What was the bad decision that led to that? And then I'll reinforce with them that I love them, and that what they did doesn't change my opinion of them, and that they're a good child.
Yeah, I think along those lines too, if we don't discipline our kids and we don't give them expectations, we set them up to fail. They're
Absolutely.
constantly failing because they don't have a marker to work towards. They don't have a goal, and their kids are goal oriented. They want to know what they have to do to reach whatever. You know what I mean? So
Proper discipline is a form of love.
exactly.
Yeah, go ahead, you
I
guys.
think what you talked about, each kid's different. Ezra, you might be surprised, his personality is not too far from Caden's, which makes me concerned if those two ever get, just the fact that they're friends concerns me. I can only imagine.
They're back there
I'm sorry
plotting
for
to take
everyone
over the
who's
world
friends
right
with
now.
Caden right now. I'm sorry. I'm really
Yeah,
trying.
right. But if I learned early on, I think they actually have a term for this now in the parenting books. It's called a spirited child. Spirited used to be, it was much more derogatory than previously back when we were growing up. But I could easily find myself as a discipline becoming just this escalating issue of my voice raising, and it's just a constant discipline of Ezra, stop doing that. Ezra, listen, and it becomes out of control. And I've seen this modeled again in Walmart frequently. You can become that parent. It happens at Target too. We're not elitist at Awaken here. Every class of store, Target. That's right. So you can see where, like, there's another end of the spectrum where you never stop disciplining, and you got to reform your strategy. You can't just constantly be bringing the rod and trying to beat them into shape or even scold them into shape if it's just not their personality. Ezra would challenge me and fight me. Yesterday, this is great. He punched me in the face twice when I was trying to send him in timeout, and I'm like, what punch? That's a little extreme. We had been wrestling earlier, but he did. He hit me in the face a couple times. And I was like, Ezra, stay here. This is a new situation for Daddy. And so I went in. Bethany was nursing Eleanor. I was like, Bethany, Ezra hit me in the face twice. What should I do? And, we're of the mindset that there are times for that physical discipline, but don't necessarily want to model when you hit somebody, you get hit for it, like that sort of blow for blow idea. And so it ended up being just for him, we had to pause, and he had to have a long sit down talk with Daddy about why you don't do that and why that hurt my feelings and why that hurt me. And but the line I probably shouldn't have said was like, would you like it if Daddy hit you in the face? And
That was one of those questions I talked about last week.
The look on his face was like that's an option. Immediately regretted that. So maybe don't threaten to hit your kid in the face unless you're gonna do it. But anyways, the point is, like, there's certain kids that would be the wrong approach. You could just give him a look like Malachi. He was the sweetest boy I've ever met, and he doesn't do anything wrong. But where there's other kids who want to challenge you and fight you, and you have to just sit down and have a strategy with your spouse about how do we handle this and how are we consistent, and know their personalities, know your kids.
I know we need to wrap up, but there's a lot of questions that we talked about that I really, like I said, that there's a lot of questions I probably wasn't overly qualified, not being a parent myself. However, this is one I can really speak to because I work at an elementary school, and I'm right there at the front desk. So I've seen parenting style after parenting style after parenting style come through the door. And this is going to sound really cliche. This is not going to be anything new or revelatory, nothing that you haven't heard before. But it really is important to remember that ultimately you are responsible for being your child's parent more so than you are for being their friend. And there are kids that'll come in with their parents, and they'll be running around doing whatever they want. And the parent threatens. They say, don't make me get the principal after you. Don't make me he's going to come get you, talking to me because I'm there at the desk. He's going to come get you and take you into the office if you don't behave. And I just remember thinking back to elementary school where it was the flip side. The last thing we wanted to do was for them to call our parent. And so, I mean, for that, it was that you talk to the principal, you're scared because principal's going to call mom. But I see in my school all the time where mom's sitting right next to them, and they're like, oh, they're going to get security after you. Principal's going to come out and sit you down. You don't want that. And it makes me sad because they've lost that. They've lost that guidance. They've lost that. They've lost really the respect that there are people in their lives that they would be more scared of disappointing and more scared of having that conversation with their parent. And I'm certainly not saying that your child should be scared of you as a parent. And there's plenty of situations where you need to be a friend to your child. But ultimately, you are most responsible for guiding them, for preparing them to be a member of society in this world that knows how to interact with other people in a positive way. And that's your ultimate responsibility. God has given those kids to you to bring them up to know Him and to be a godly young man or a godly young woman. And so don't ever sacrifice being a parent in order to remain your child's friend. And again, that's cliche. You've heard it 100 times, but it's so important, and I see it every day in my school.
Jeff, would you help me raise my children?
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's we've got to wrap up here, but I think that's true. As a church, we are called to help one another. If my kids do something, I want to know about it, and some of you I entrust to, say, hey, this is not the right course of action. So I think that's true. Lisa, real quick, and then Connie
Real
has
quick,
something.
your kids are going to get mad at you. They're not going to like you sometimes, and they're going to say that they hate you. Then you're doing your job right, because you've got to. You like you said, you can't be their friend. You have to be the parent, and you can't sit there. Oh well, if I say this, they're gonna be mad at me, or they're not gonna like me. They will love you. They may not like you at the moment, so just remember that.
Good.
Real
Connie?
quick, I just wanted to add, when it comes to Kaden is the way she is because I was that child.
Mm-hmm.
So my parents struggled raising me because they didn't know. They were trying to change me. They were trying to change the way I responded to things. And I got so frustrated, and it led to a lot of angry outbursts from me because that was the mistake that they were making, and they'll tell you that, is that they were trying to change my personality. But I was created that way by God as a strong-willed person, and that is not wrong. So I need to... when we're disciplining our kids, we also need to remember that their personality is their personality, and there's nothing that we can do to change it. And when we try, we only hurt them in the long run. So we need to make sure that we discipline around that as well.
Good. Wrapping up here, I know with the discipline, we spoke a lot to the fact of having smaller kids. Obviously, as our children grow older, it's probably not appropriate to pull a 16-year-old and say, you got time out. Or if you choose to spank them, it's probably inappropriate as well.
Well, I was just going to say, my dad got real creative when we got older into high school about how you punished, because he wasn't very good at grounding us. He would ground us for 2 weeks, and then like a week later we'd be out doing something, and we'd be like, wasn't he supposed to be grounded? Ah, crap, forgot. But he got real creative. We have been on the most ridiculous restrictions in my house. If we left the light on, we got on light bulb restriction. My dad came into my room and removed every light bulb from my bedroom because I wouldn't stop leaving the light on when I left it. If we didn't clean up in the kitchen, we were on cooking restriction. We weren't allowed to use the stove, microwave, anything. We just had to whatever we could eat cold. So I mean, you can get creative with your discipline. Like you said, you can't spank a child in high school. And there's some other things you shouldn't do. But don't be afraid to get creative as a parent.
I think in regards to that, too, the band can go ahead and come on up. In regards to that, too, I think it is appropriate with an older child that if you're having curfew issues or some of those kind of things, I think it's okay sometimes to have to get the authorities involved. I would much rather my child to learn that early on in their teens than to be 25 and still doing things that are contrary to the law. So great questions. If there was a question that maybe you would have missed this morning or that you have that wasn't answered, I would encourage you to come talk to somebody that was on the panel. You can still submit those through YouVersion, and we can post those if that would be helpful. Other than that, thank you, all you guys that were involved in the panel, and Jeff will continue to lead us in worship.